Welcome to School and Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds, featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I am your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team, here to lead conversations and to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. Maybe you've been listening for a while, or this is your first episode. If you like what you hear, would you do us a favor by rating and reviewing us on iTunes? This is a fantastic way to tell us you enjoy what we are creating. Also, if you want more MTSS resources, sign up for our weekly newsletter using the link in our show notes, and check out our website for all the blogs and guides you would ever need about MTSS. Today, we are excited to welcome a couple of guests today. So I'm excited to introduce both of them. First, from Branching Minds, we have Trudy Bender, who is our Senior Manager of Thought Leadership Content. And she was a former school psychologist, district leader, and educator. And then we also have today Angela Watson, and so who is a productivity mindset specialist, author, motivational speaker, podcaster. And she is a nationally board certified and has a master's degree in curriculum and instruction, along with many years in the classroom and a decade of experience as an instructional coach, and is all about helping teachers thrive in their roles. And so we're excited to have Angela. I'm a longtime fan of hers. And so we're excited to have her join Trudy today to talk about addressing teacher workload. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah,
You're
I'm
welcome.
also a longtime fan of Angela. I used some of her work way back when I was in the classroom, and is one of the things that helped me get on a track to thinking more about behavior. And I switched from being a teacher to a school psychologist, really specializing in behavior. And there was a lot, there are so many things that you can do to create a structure in your classroom to help behavior be better. And then so many ways also that when you manage your own workload and you feel on top of what's happening, that you can be more present for your kids, which also helps, gives you that space, that mental space. We talk a lot about cognitive load, and my goodness, does teaching come with a heavy cognitive load? And so whatever we can do to take some of that off and leave more space just to connect with each other. So it's just such a delight to have you here, Angela. So today we're going to talk about contributing factors to teacher frustration and burnout. A question I have for you, you work with educators all over the country. What's a common misunderstanding about educators and why they're leaving the profession? What is something that you hear from the outside and you think, actually, I'm on the ground with educators all the time, and I think that's a misconception. Does anything come to mind?
We talk a lot about the salary, and salaries are definitely part of it. But if I think when I talk with folks, they would be what they're really looking for is the resources and the support. And
Yeah.
that's what we saw in the result of this poll. It was salaries/resources.
Mhm.
So if I have everything that I need to do my job well, if I feel supported, if I'm not paying for all of my own materials out of my pocket, creating things from scratch, if I have a school psychologist to support me, if there's, other people on staff, that's going to change the way that I look at the salary. I think it's all interconnected.
Mhm.
There's lots of different contributing factors. There's not just one thing. But I think the piece that's often missed by folks outside of the educational system is that how I think they misunderstand how very little agency educators feel like they have. They feel like they are so accountable and responsible, but they don't have the agency. So you're
Mhm.
being, your hands are sort of tied where you can't do your job the way that you want to be doing it because you don't have those resources and support. But at the same time, when things don't go well, then you're scapegoated. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, well, teachers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like their hands are tied. And that's really obvious to anybody, I think, inside the system. But the general public, I don't think understands like how much teachers are feeling like they are held responsible for factors that are outside of their control. And so when you feel disempowered, and then on top of that, you're making less money,
Mhm.
that it's a not a great combination. And so that's why I think looking at these solutions is so important.
Yeah. Do you think that it's gotten worse over the last several years? Like your perception? It certainly seems to be an outside perception that it's gotten harder, that resources are more scarce. I wonder, though, if it isn't that the resources have maybe remained the same, but the needs have gotten so much larger, or the scope of what teachers and schools are expected to do. What do you think? What's happened over the last few years that might be contributing to this?
Yeah, I agree, Trudy. I think we are asking more and more of schools. We are asking for more personalization, individualizing. We are teaching kids way more things than we used to teach them. If you look at the curriculum in like the 1950s, what was a first grader expected to do versus what they're doing now? We're addressing mental health. We're feeding them. We're transporting them. We're, providing counseling service. We're providing medical checkups. Like it's so much has been placed on the backs of schools that it's no wonder that they're not able to do everything that they've been asked to do. So, yeah, I think you're exactly right. The needs have increased and the resources have not. And so it's sort of put us at a breaking point in the system in a way that I hope is going to lead us to something new. Because as we saw during the early days of the pandemic, that, when there is change happening, we can make quick changes in education if we are motivated, if the incentives are high enough, if the circumstances are serious enough. Because I mean, we managed to switch to remote learning all of a sudden, like, within a week, we figured it out, right?
Yeah.
And teachers were a hero for like a whole week before becoming the villains. So we've proven that we can actually affect change in schools and in the way that we do school. And so if we can do it for that, we can do it again. And I think where we're at right now with teacher attrition and burnout, this is another breaking point. This is a time to really be proactive and think about what can we do to support educators and keep our best folks in the field and attract new ones as well.
Yeah. What role do institutional policies play in all of this? I know that there's been a lot going on in the last 5 to 10 years, especially. What can those institutional leaders, our district and our state leaders, be doing to alleviate educator burnout and provide better support for educators? What should be at the top of their minds?
Believe it or not, I actually have a simple answer to this that isn't just sort of like hedging around and saying 500 different things, even though 500 different things would help. There's one thing that I think makes a bigger difference than anything else that I always recommend when I'm working with administrators in our 40-hour leadership program, which helps them figure out how to streamline processes. And that is protect teachers' planning time. That's the number one thing. Teachers have been asking for that for like 30, 40 years, and it's not happening. There's meetings, there's, so many other things encroaching in their time. And when we look at like the aspects of a teacher's job that are the most important, one of the most important things is your lesson design, right? It's knowing your curriculum, knowing how you're going to teach it, being very thoughtful and reflecting on it. And then assessment afterwards, right? To look at the results. What did students learn? How did they learn? Well, there's no time for that in the school day. So when are teachers doing it? 10 o'clock on a Sunday night? I mean, lesson planning, lesson design, lesson planning, and assessment are way too important to expect teachers to just relegate that to the margins of their day, to try to squeeze that in after dinner with their families. Like, we need time during the day. And so really valuing teachers' time and trusting them to be able to use unstructured blocks of time, because that's another aspect that's really missing. If there is a block of time for teachers during the day, it's expected to be collaborative, or it's a team meeting, or it's something else. Teachers need unstructured time. They need to be trusted to have that autonomy. If you give me 30 minutes in the middle of the day in my classroom, I'm going to get important work done. And I have to be able to depend on that. I can't worry that, oh, the music teacher's out or the art teacher's out and there's no sub and now I don't have planning time. Like, they have to have that dedicated planning time. And that will do more for morale than I think anything else, is feeling like you value my time, you're not giving me unnecessary meetings, and that that I need to be planning during the school day. I need to be assessing during the school day. And there are ways that can happen. I'm sure we'll get into some of those more specifics, how to make that a reality. But that's the number one thing: protect teachers' planning time, give them autonomous, unstructured blocks of time to work. That's what they're asking for. They're not getting it, and they need it.
I just wanted to pop in. I'm sorry. I'm sitting here like clapping. I'm like, yes. This is, as an educator, there was a shift, when I lost like, a team planning time, and and then the years where we would have limited subs and people were covering, like, the morale and the way that the environment, how that affected everyone around us, like, as teachers, we just didn't have the space to do the work that we knew that was important. And I think that in itself is also disempowering, because it's like, I want to do my job really well, but I just don't have the time.
Yes.
And I think really, really valuable, great teaching happens when you give teachers space to create great lessons and to problem solve with each other. And it just, when you don't have that, teachers are, you just kind of come and you're just a body in a room and you're just holding down the fort, basically. And that's just not a great feeling. That's not, I mean, I don't think anyone really wants to do that as a job. And so I think what you said of just protecting teachers' time is a very, very important part of the work as a leader. And so I just wanted to echo on that. Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of cheering going on from that answer. But I love that you gave such a clear, direct, this is something that you can do, as challenging as it is. Not to say that that's easy to carve out that time and to protect it. But if you have to, and if you recognize that that's your highest priority, then there are some other things that might have to fall away, or get creative about how to meet those other needs. But to have something that you can walk away today and say, all right, here's one thing that would make the biggest difference, I think is really, really helpful. So you mentioned that you have some practical ideas for that maybe we could talk about later. So we're going to come back to that. We'll put a pin in it. We're going to come back when we talk about some really practical ways, some practical ideas that you have for that. So that's a really, really helpful and important thing to talk about. So you mentioned that another challenge that's happening is that teachers are being asked to personalize, like individualize, and provide intervention for so many students in so many different areas, academically, behaviorally, socially, mental health. Like there are so many different ways that teachers are being asked to intervene. And I noticed too that people mentioned a lot the state mandates that are so overwhelming right now, where you're being asked to document everything you do, and there's such a heavy burden on intervention. And Branching Minds, of course, is very interested in that, because we're a MTSS platform, and we were created because a teacher, our founder, Maya, went out on maternity leave and said, I'm not going to have time to spend all evening every day anymore. I'm going to have a baby. I have to have a better way, and was trying to create this platform. And then it became successful. It kind of came out of that desire to help meet all of those students' needs and manage the workload. So we know MTSS is heavy on teachers. It's heavy psychologically, and it's heavy as a workload. So how do we balance all of that need? You've got these state mandates, you've got all of these varying student needs, and just that alone, just knowing that you've got this whole classroom full of people who have all of these needs. How do we balance that when we have our own needs? Our students need so much, but we've got our own needs as well. What are some ideas, or what's some perspective that you could offer on balancing our own needs and our students' needs?
I think that in this area, I just keep thinking about what Larissa just said about how you feel like you're just not doing a great job. You don't have the time you need to do a good job, and it's really disempowering. And I'm not a parent myself, but I hear that from a lot of parents too, that I just constantly feel like I'm failing as a parent, that I'm not doing everything I need to do
Yeah.
for my kids. And it is very, very demoralizing. And so when I think about this idea of being pulled in different directions, of feeling like, you're not being a great partner or a great friend or a great family member or a great parent or a great teacher, I think one of the ways to sort of address that is to think about blocking off time for specific things. So, really having very clear boundaries in terms of when you are focusing on each thing. So when you are at work, as much as possible, try not to check personal email, try not to check text messages. There were so many times when I was teaching and I would, have 2 minutes to myself, and I would glance down at my messages, and it would be like my husband saying, hey, the car broke down and it needs a repair. And I'm like, oh, and now what am I thinking about? I'm not present with my students anymore. I'm back in my personal life. Why did I look at that in the middle of a lesson? That was not a good idea. So, and then the same thing, of course, you don't want to be looking at school email at 10 o'clock at night. So really getting very clear about what you're going to work on when, and that can be done through batch planning. So, instead of answering every single email as it comes in, you have set times when you look at it. A lot of teachers and educators, I recommend working in sort of theme days. So maybe Thursday afternoons is when you catch up on your grading. Depending on your workload, maybe you need to have, 2 or 3 days a week for that. It's like, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday afternoons is when I grade. Friday afternoons is when I set everything up for the next week. Maybe Wednesday mornings, I make all my photocopies. You figure out the schedule that works for you, and it doesn't have to be super rigid. But the idea is that you're not always feeling like you should be doing something else. So if you're sitting there and you're supposed to be planning, and you look over and you see this huge stack of papers that are ungraded, or students are pinging you and saying, "Hey, is my essay done? Did you grade it?" You can say to them, I grade essays on Thursday afternoons. So I'll have that to you on Friday, or you'll be able to log into the portal and see that on Thursday afternoon. So having these very clear times when you're working on specific things and communicating that to people is really helpful. So if you find that you're constantly being interrupted by emails from families throughout the day, have it in your auto reply. From this time to this time, I'm 100% focused on the kids. And I will check your email between 3 and 4 p.m. And that's when you can expect a response from me. If you email me, you're free to email me in the evenings. Email me whenever it's convenient for you. You can email me on weekends as well. I will respond to you Monday morning between 7:30 and 8. And most will respect that because you've let them know. They're not just, hanging like, why hasn't she gotten back to me? They know, oh, okay, she answers emails at this time and this time, and that's what I'm going to hear back. Or this is when the grades get entered into the portal. So I'm not going to keep asking him over and over and over again, when is my grade? When is my grade ready? I know that I can trust him to, I can trust my teacher to go in and follow the schedule and, do what they said they were going to do. So I think having those very clear ideas, communicating them well, and keep it very loose for yourself. So you don't want to overpromise something, and you don't want to box yourself in, because every single week is different. But just have a general idea of what you're going to be doing when, and give yourself flexibility within that. So if you know that you're planning to grade on Thursdays, then promise to have the grades in by Friday. And that gives you that little bit of extra time. And just experiment, see what works well for you, and try it out. But if you don't do it that way, if you don't plan proactively, then you're just sort of putting out fires, and you're just sort of being pulled toward whoever seems to need you more at that moment. And there's always going to be somebody who needs you more than what you're doing right now. There's always something more urgent. So having those theme days can just take the stress off. Like, okay, I know I need to handle this, but this is not the day for that. That's my task for Tuesday. It's going to get handled Tuesday. And until then, I don't have to think about it. It's written down. It's on my list. I have dedicated time to handling this thing at this day and time. That's what I'm going to do it. And now I can be present in the task that I am supposed to be focusing on.
Yeah. Yeah. This idea of agency, you've brought that up several times, right? A feeling that you don't have agency is what makes you feel exhausted and a failure at the end of the day, because you feel like you have not been in control of your own time, your own life, your own effort. So I love what you shared, and this comes right out of all the productivity stuff, right? Is saying, I'm going to block out this set amount of time, even if it's not a long amount of time, and say, this time is set aside for this task, which does, as you said, two things. One, you know that you're going to have some time to do that task, but it also takes that load off your mind and allows you to be present in what you're doing at the current time. So that's a really, really helpful advice, and something that I was able to do somewhat when I was teaching as well, is have those, I love that you call them theme days. I didn't call them that, but that's what they were. They were theme days. Where I did certain things on each day of the week, and was able to take a little control back of my own schedule at that time. Larissa, did you want to add something?
Well, I was going to add to this, that this was actually a practice before I left the classroom. I really got good at, like, I didn't want to take work home anymore. I wanted to have more free evenings. And so I really strove to, like, I'd pick one day a week that I maybe stayed a half hour extra, so that I could make sure that all my, like, grades were done. And so that way, like, and I set the deadline with parents, and it really helped. Like, I just said every, Tuesday, I'm going to stay for this extra half hour. And maybe I needed that half hour, maybe I didn't, but I think, like, committing to that really helped me. Then I wasn't trying to grade in between all of, cause you see those teachers that bring their stack of papers to the staff meeting, cause they're trying to get their grades done, or they always have a stack of papers. I just didn't understand. It's like, how do you always have a stack of papers you're grading? And so, like, and I was an English teacher, so I had to figure out I had to figure out efficient ways to grade essays and things like that. So, you know, there's lots of tips to go into that, but I think that it really helped me mentally know I have the space for that. So I don't need to try to fit it in elsewhere. And that did really free up my brain to like, focus on whatever, the was the theme of Monday or two, and so I think that in itself, right, the mental load of thinking I got to try to get this done as quickly as possible, um, actually like helped me feel more like present and be able to be ready for whatever Monday had. So I was like, I'll do it. I'll worry about that on Tuesday. So I just wanted to comment on that. I
Yeah.
love that advice.
Yeah, it just that's kind of a little psychological trick too, that when you set a set amount of time and say, I'm really going to commit to get this done in this amount of time, often we can get done far more than we think. Whereas if you have a work will expand to fill whatever amount of time that you give to it. So have you found that to be true as well, Angela?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's another question for you, and this is really the meat of what we want to talk about today, which is to share some strategies for educators to manage workload and reduce stress. You've mentioned a couple of fantastic ones already, but I want to give you a little time to lay out a couple more. Like, let's go back and talk a little bit about how to save planning time. If you're an administrator and you're looking for how to make your teachers happier, how do you do that? Along with whatever other tips you'd like to share, some strategies for educators to manage.
Sure. I think that a lot of this is about being proactive and having a plan ahead of time. So, for example, I worked with one school leader in our 40-hour leadership program who said that his teachers were complaining that there were always last-minute meetings. And so teachers saw that as taking away their planning time. It was really eroding morale because they thought they had this time and then they discovered that they couldn't count on it. But when I worked with him to map out all of the meetings for the entire year in August to determine what actually needed to be a meeting and what could be an email, what could be a screencast. Maybe it's something that you could just, share your screen and show people. It's a 5 to 10 minute video folks can watch on demand. If you're using a platform like Loom, you can actually see who has watched the video so you can gauge to see how well it worked. Sometimes people say, well, if we don't have a meeting, then people won't read the email or they won't watch the video, but you can build in more accountability for that. And you can have conversations about it too. Like, we have a choice here. I need to convey information to you. Which would you prefer? Would you prefer to have a staff meeting after school? Or would you prefer that I send you a link to a 5 minute video that you can watch, sometime in the next 48 hours is when I need you to watch this because, you need to have this information by Thursday. And people are going to say, I'd rather have the video. So that gives them an incentive, right? Because now you haven't just said, I want you to watch this video. It's like, I need to convey this information to everyone. I think this is the most efficient way. Let's try it. Let's see how it goes. You can give me feedback. Let me know, was it not enough time? Was it too much time? Should it have been a meeting? Really bring folks into the process so that that they know that you care about their time, that you value their time, and you see it as something important. So he discovered that a lot of the meetings did not need to be meetings, but also the ones that did, a lot of times could be mapped out in advance. So you can decide, every Wednesday, the third Wednesday of every month is this kind of meeting. The second Tuesday of every month is when we're going to do this, and have the way that he did it. I mean, you could obviously do it digitally too for this school. It worked best to have it on a big whiteboard that was in the school office. So when teachers went in to check their mail, make photocopies, etc., they could see it. And if things needed to be moved, it was all there, but you could see at a glance, that I'm going to have to stay after school, or I'm not going to have planning time on this date 3 months from now. I know this in advance. So I should not wait on a task, and hope that I have that kind of planning time. And the great thing about this is when you've mapped it all out, then if you decide that you don't need that meeting, if there actually isn't that much information, you can cancel the meeting. And then people are really happy with you because they thought that they were going to be stuck in a meeting and now they have extra planning time. So it's so much better to tell folks we're going to be doing this, 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 and this. We have streamlined as many meetings as we can. It's not, a ton because we found other ways to communicate, or even make our meetings shorter, which is another, really good help. For example, if you need staff to brainstorm something, they can do that in a Google form or a Google Doc or something ahead of time. Then when you get to the meeting, you're just discussing the results instead of hashing everything out back and forth for 20 minutes. Like that could already be done. So you can restructure meetings, streamline meetings, eliminate meetings. And then the ones that you do think that are necessary, hold space for them in the calendar. So people are ready for it and they set aside time for it. And then if you don't need that time, now you're the hero because you just canceled it and gave people even more planning time. So this is this sounds like, I don't know, maybe it does sound like a lot. You can tell me what you think, but it actually only took about 2 hours to map that out, to map out a general plan for your
Yeah.
meetings for the year. That was it. 2 hours worth of work done in the summer, communicated to staff. Everybody knew what to expect. No more last minute meetings. And if something did come up last minute, the great thing is you knew when the next meeting was. So you can decide, okay, can I wait 2 days to communicate this to them? I probably can. I can just tack it on to that other meeting, or I can, use this idea of the 5-minute screencast or something like that. So it just made everybody feel like my time is valued. My administration sometimes has to, I have to do these, random trainings sometimes for the district that don't seem very valuable, just perfunctory, but I know when it is. And I know that I'm not doing any more than I absolutely have to. And one more thing I'm going to say about that before I ask you what your thoughts are on this. The way that I first learned about this was from when I was a teacher. I had a principal who told us in our regular staff meeting, which was once a month. She was very good about that. She said, so the district has just asked us to input all of this additional information into the computer system. It will probably take each teacher about 2 hours. And she said, I don't want you to have to do that. I'm going to stay late tonight and I'm going to try to figure out how I can import this for you so that you don't have to do that.
Mm.
I was blown away because I never heard any leader talk like that. It was always just like, well, the district said, go do it. I need it by tomorrow. That was just, that was a normal thing because administrators are overwhelmed too. They have tons of tasks themselves. But when she said that, it made such a huge impression. It was like, she's actively trying to shield me from the bureaucracy. She's actually trying to prevent me from having to do this. And you better believe that the next week when she was like, hey, can you do an extra recess duty? I was like, absolutely, no problem. Because you're looking out for me and you know that this is something, you are actively looking for ways to reduce my workload. And just that transparency of just saying, I know this is extra work and I'm going to try to reduce this for you. The morale in that school under her leadership was so good. Those teachers would have done anything for her. And when I first transferred there, I didn't get it. I was like, why are people volunteering for like all these extra committees and everything? And they were like, just wait and see. Just wait and see. When she smiles at you, and she's so grateful. And then, she gives like, you'll see. And I did see. And I worked harder
Yeah.
for her than any other leader I'd ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, but it took that transparency. So you mentioned a couple of things. The theme that comes through a lot for you is being proactive and taking agency. Because even if not a whole lot changes, but you feel like you're the one who's directed it or that you have some control over it, just psychologically, that's such a better place to be in. And so for a school leader to take time and lay out that calendar for the year so that people know, they feel like they have more control over their time. And then just that idea of you planned it, and now I'm canceling it and giving your time back. We all love that, right? When plans get canceled, there's that feeling of, oh, yeah, right?
Free time.
Yeah, that free time. That's really amazing. But also your leader that you just mentioned, that principal had to be transparent and share what she was actually doing. I think a lot of times administrators, and I was guilty of this myself sometimes, we're doing all of this paddling under the surface to try to keep things going, but don't necessarily share the ways in which we're looking out for our teachers and seeking to make their workload easier and taking things onto ourselves to make sure that they are just doing what's absolutely needed and absolutely important and nothing more than that. You've mentioned that you have a course for administrators. You've mentioned this several times. Could you talk a little bit more about helping school administrators manage their workload? Like, what are some of the suggestions you have for them?
Yeah, that really grew out of the 40-hour teacher work week program, which is not actually about working 40 hours. That's just, it's a catchy name. The choose your own target number and adjust it every week program didn't have quite the same ring to it. So
Yeah.
that's why I called it that. 40 hours is how many hours the average teacher is contracted to work. So the idea is to maximize those paid hours so that you are not working endlessly on nights and weekends. So
Yeah.
I started that in 2015 and we've had over 55,000 teachers go through the program now at this point. And what I kept hearing from them was that, we need change at the school level. How can we change systems? Can you please create something for administrators? And a lot of teachers moved into admin programs. I was like, I want to take this school wide. What do I do? So that's really where 40-hour leadership came out. It's designed to be self-paced. It's something you can do with your admin team. Does not take a lot of time. Maybe 10 hours that you can do over the summer. And there's different ways that you can spread that out. You could do, 2 mornings or, 30 minutes every afternoon or, whatever your plan is for that. There's different ways to do it. But it's this idea of really being proactive about how do we streamline and how do we create this culture in our school in which we value each other's time, in which we don't take each other for granted and just expect that things will happen, to really think about what are people's strengths in our building and how can we get them using the most of their time in their strengths instead of, doing busy work, doing the stuff that they aren't, that isn't really making a big impact for kids. So, as I mentioned, one of the most important things is figuring out ways to protect teachers' planning time, to reduce email, to reduce meetings and things like that. Another thing is to have really good processes for communication with teachers, so that they feel like they can come to you and to show them how to come to you with solutions. So this is something that I talk to teachers about a lot, is that when something is not working, if you're waiting for someone else to come up with a solution for you, you're probably not going to like the solution they come up with because they don't know your job as well as you do. So if you go to your principal and you're like, these are too many additional duties, I can't do all of this. What is your principal supposed to do with that? Now your principal has to figure out something and they're busy and they've got a lot of other things to think about. And whatever they decide is going to make someone else unhappy. So come in with a couple different solutions and really make that the culture in the school where you're allowed to speak up when your workload is too much, that you don't just suffer in silence, that you don't make that work invisible. Like you were just saying, it's like administrators always sort of like paddling but it's under the water, but and teachers don't know about it. They don't know how many things their admins are actually doing to help them. And there are ways to communicate that don't sound like, oh, you should be so grateful to me. It's just more like, here's what's happening at the district level, state level, national level. Here's what I've been doing to handle it. And here's some ways that, that I hope it will, this is how I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't have a negative effect on you. So just surfacing that, making that invisible work visible, and for teachers to do the same thing, because administrators also don't know how many little things. They don't know that there's one parent or one student that's taking up like 6 hours of your time every single week. And so having this transparency where we are talking about what we are doing to support each other, coming with solutions, and really creating that culture where it's fine to ask for help. It's fine to ask for what you need, but be specific about what it is you want. Focus on the solution, not just the problem. It's a game changer. It is.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of one of those solutions, let's talk a little bit about technology. So what role is technology playing in making life easier for teachers? And what are some strategies or suggestions you have around technology?
There's so many great tools out right now. And I think that's part of the problem, right? Is the overwhelm of feeling there's so many different things competing for your attention. And obviously AI, artificial intelligence is, stealing a lot of the spotlight right now. I've seen that there's a lot of concerns about the ethics around it, as there, rightfully should be. I think we need to be really mindful about it. But I've seen teachers have really great results in streamlining their teaching and feeling like it helps them with some of the mundane tasks. So, AI is really good at translating things. So if you have families that you have difficulty communicating with, it's a good translation tool. It's really good at proofreading. So if you're about to send an important email, run it through before I send any email out to my list. I always run it through ChatGPT and like, hey, can you fix typos for me? And it often catches things that a human eye we don't notice, that like a word is missing or something. So it's very good at that. It's very good at ordering information, analyzing results. Like there's lots of different ways to build it into your workload. So that's one of the things that I'm really focusing on right now with teachers, is the 40-hour AI program, which is coming out this summer. And it's just designed to take out some of that overwhelm and to focus on what are the most impactful ways that AI can streamline your work, without like all the cool things, right? Because there's so many possibilities. And a lot of the talk about AI is that list of things it can do, as I just mentioned. What we really need is a way to incorporate it into our existing habits and our existing system so it can speed things up. It's not just an afterthought, but it's sort of a go-to that is helping to accelerate your work, not replace you, not replace your creativity, not in any way violate student privacy or data or anything like that. But there's lots of different ways that it can really take some of the mundane tasks off your plate so you can focus on the higher level stuff that only you as an education professional can do. So I'm cautiously optimistic about AI. I think there will be some really positive things and also some really negative things for our society and for our schools that come out of this. But I think we need to have good people leading the way. We need to have thoughtful educators who are informed about it, helping to shape the narrative about how it's being used so we can make sure that we're doing what's best for kids and educators.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. And I think AI is, my goodness, in all of our work, no matter what profession you're in, there are so many applications for that. And it will be really interesting to see how teachers make the most of it. And teachers are by nature creative and entrepreneurial often. And so I'll be really interested to see what comes from that. Let's talk a little bit more, Angela, about your 40-hour work week program in general. So we would just love to hear about the work that you do. I know you have some new cohorts and courses that are going to be starting soon. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about 40-hour work week.
Yeah, so it's 40htw.com if someone wants to link that in, or you can also just Google 40-hour teacher work week, it'll come up. So there's a course for instructional coaches, there's one for leaders, and there's one for teachers. And then of course we'll have the AI stuff coming up too. So there's lots of different programs that I've developed with educators, with people who are in these positions, who have just given me feedback. And what we're trying to do is just compile the best ideas, the most impactful ways to save time and keep doing a great job for kids, because that's really at the heart of it, right? Is making sure that you are able to do the things that are really moving the needle for them and not getting caught up in all the other things. And there are replicable systems. There are things that you can do. Sort of tying back to what we said at the very beginning, it's not a hopeless case. There are folks who love their work and they found a sustainable way to do it. And if a person hasn't found that yet, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. You may need a different teaching position. You may need to be at a different grade level with a different, school leader, a different superintendent. There could be different factors in there. And also your habits, your routines, your procedures, the way that you're approaching your work, that might be also something that you can tweak. But I hear on a daily basis from folks who still really, really love their work. They found ways to make it work. And I just find that so hopeful, so optimistic. It makes me so happy. And I want to share more of that. Let's talk more about what's working and let go of this narrative that, teaching is an awful place and no one wants to teach anymore, because there are so many people who don't fit that story, and their stories deserve to be told too. And I think that's what really gives us hope for the future of the profession.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Angela, we're so grateful to you. Thank you for taking the time to come and share your own work. It has been just absolutely great. We would, again, love to hear from any of you. Thank you, Larissa, for moderating today. This was great.
Yeah, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. This was fun. Thanks for listening to School and Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn @Branching Minds.